Automating After Effects is back. I'm going to take you through the process of making this guy right here. It's a PGA Tour leaderboard populated with data from a CSV file. This CSV file will be linked somewhere below. This is going to be a non-code tutorial. We will be using expressions in After Effects to link up the data, but we will not be using outside code. The code opportunities come in web scraping and CSV creation with Python, and in making a script for After Effects using extend script that would populate the comp for us instead of doing it by hand. But I'm giving you the CSV file already made, so no Python needed, and we are going to populate the comp by hand, so no extend script needed. So fear not, those of you who are terrified of code, I understand. However, at the end, if you are looking for the code, I will very briefly go over this example here and the Python and the extend script code that I used to make it. If you've never seen it before, I do have this video on my channel that is a very slow walkthrough of something similar, but it's getting pretty old at this point, and I don't think Python code still holds up. I'm going to start with a vertical comp that's 1080 by 1920. I'll make a rectangle and size it down to something like this. This will be my headline, my title. Import my logo and make it a dark green, kind of a master's color green. Let's make it an 8-bit pixel art style. I'm typing in the placeholder text for this information, and I end up changing the position later, so that's not important right now. I used to play this Neo Geo golf game a lot when I was a kid, so I'm gonna sort of steal some colors or some styles from it. Now I'm making the titles, the backgrounds for the titles, where it will say things like position, name, total, through, and round. I'm going to make the title look like that golf game and add a stroke and some color to it. Now I'm making a new comp that's going to be the board for the player's name and information and score and all that. I make its height 100 pixels, which I changed later, and I'll explain why when we get there. But the most important thing is its name, 1. Just name it 1, the number 1. That's it. Make a rectangle background. Give it an awful green color. Now I'm making the squares that will hold the information. The ones that hold the scores will change color based on the score. The other two will stay put. Adding the text for each, and I'm not really worrying about the anchor points and the alignment right now. That will get worked out later. I'm kind of just blocking everything out and getting the placeholder info in there. I'm going to rename all my layers and change the colors, add a drop shadow to everything. Remember when I talked about the comp being 100 pixels in height and I change it later? This is why. So the issue is I want these names or these boards to animate on. I want them to move up and appear like magic. I'm going to be adding these things by hand and positioning them by hand. Remember, no code in this example. So I would have some issues if I were to keyframe the position and then move the position afterward. So I'm going to make the comp taller, add the position animation into the comp itself, and handle the opacity back in the main comp. Now you see I can adjust the position easily and not worry about position keyframes. Now I'm going to fill out the main comp. I'm going to delay each by, I think it's 4 frames is what I did, and then position it right below the one on top. And it might be a little tedious, but once they're in place, you're done. That's it. So it's not so bad. Delete that last row, that's too many. And just do that again and spread them out so I get 3 full screens of names. That's 36 total players. Now I'm going to import my 2 CSVs. One has the scores on it, and it looks like this. The other one has the tournament info on it, and it looks like this. You can just make your own tournament CSV. It's 2 lines. I believe in you. Or you could just skip the CSV for that part entirely and just type it in yourself. It is a bit of overkill to use it for the tournament name and date. I don't exactly know why I did that, but yeah. And I'm gonna put them in my folder to stay organized. Before I link to the CSV, I want to rename the layers. We're gonna set this one up for the winner, JT Poston. JT Poston. The top row in the CSV gets ignored. So the position of JT is at 0, 0 in the array. So in source text, alt-click to add an expression. Pick whip to the scores.csv and type .data value and inside brackets 0, 0. And it looks exactly the same because it was a 1 anyway, but it worked, I promise. Now, remember when I said the comp name being a 1 was really important? This is why right here. Instead of hard coding the data value as 0, 0, we're going to use the comp name as one of those numbers. So when we duplicate the 1 comp, it renames itself 2, and it uses that 2 as its number, and that moves it down a row in the CSV, and that's basically the trick. That's the magic of this whole thing. So I create a variable named comp name, and we have to subtract 1 from the comp name. We want index 0 for our comp that's named 1. So we have to use parseInt to turn it into an integer, and we can do some math on it and subtract 1. So basically, it's 1 minus 1 equals 0, and we replace the second value with comp name. And again, it didn't change, but look when we duplicate it. The position changes to tied for second, T2, the next one down the row. We will mess with the formatting later, the formatting for the text. So now I'm going to do the same thing I just did, but with the name, the total score, holes completed, and today's round. And let's duplicate the comp just to see if it worked. Scott Stallings, Emiliano Grillo, and Denny McCarthy. Looks good. And I'm not done yet with the comp, but when I am, this is how I'll place them. Just replace the comps I have laid out with the correct ones. And to do that, you hold Alt while dragging, and that'll replace the comp where it is. But back in comp 1, I want the text anchor point to always be centered, so no matter what info comes through, it is formatted correctly. I'm going to use this expression on the anchor point using sourceRect@time, and that keeps my anchor point centered at all times. I'll copy that to the other text layers, and we're almost done now. If you look at the CSV file for the scores, you'll see there's a column at the end with a 0 in it. That is for the tee time. So the site that I scrape the info from sometimes has a tee time instead of a through and today's round because the person hasn't teed off yet, but other players have. So that last column will either be a 0 for no tee time or a time for a tee time. The way I'm going to handle that in this animation is make a tee time board that covers the through and the today's round. If the tee time column equals 0, the opacity will be 0. You can't see it. If the tee time column has a tee time, the opacity will be 100 and it will be visible. The tee time value I'm going to link up in the same way I did the other info. Since it's 0 for this, I want the opacity to be 0. Use a good old if statement for this. And I forget to define comp name, but once I do, it'll work. Okay. And then I can just pick whip the background's opacity to the text's opacity. And there it is. I'm going to change the layout of the title a little bit and do the same anchor point trick I used earlier. And I'm duplicating all these and putting them into their correct spots because I think I'm done, but I'm actually not, because I forgot to make the background colors change depending on the score. So if the player is under par, the background will be red. If they're even par, it'll be green. And if they're over par, it'll be gray. To do that, I go back into the comp 1 and make a new blank shape layer. Call it colors and add 3 color controls to it. Name them accordingly and pick the colors. It's good to do it this way because it'll be easy to change the colors later in the future if need be. The expression for this little magic trick is a little complicated because our scores are strings and not numbers. So we have to change them to numbers first before we can see if they are over, under, or even par. Over or under 0, basically, or equal 0. I make a variable called score where I get the score from the text layer. I declare a variable called num to hold the number. If score is even, that number gets 0. If it's not even, then it just becomes that number because we are lucky that parseInt recognizes the positive and negative sign. Positive numbers don't usually have the plus sign in front of them, so it saves us some time that parseInt recognizes that. Now that we have the number, we can just do some if statements. If it's over 0, return the over par color. If it equals 0, return the even par color. And anything else, return the under par color. One problem with the font I'm using, it's a Stardew Valley font, and it appears that it has no plus symbol. So I'm gonna download and change to this 8-bit sort of pixel font here once I'm finished with all this. And I copied the fill expression to the total score background as well. And after I duplicated it 35 times and aligned it all up, this is what it looks like. And this here is how it looks after I ran my Python script to scrape the leaderboard at a different time, and it just fits. If we did everything right, which I think we did. So for this video, I gave you the CSV file already made, but what if you wanted to make it yourself? I used Python and Selenium to scrape the PGA Tour website. My coding skills are good enough to not be afraid of coding, but I don't feel like I can teach you much about anything with coding. I'm an animator that codes. I am not a coder that animates. I learned this all from YouTube and Google searches, and if I did, you can too. So I'm gonna go through it as quickly as possible. These lines here are all setup junk, something you gotta do to get it working. Then here it sleeps for 2 seconds because I need to let the page load first. These lines get the tournament name and date, and these lines clean the date into the format I want to use, but I don't actually use them. I don't actually write them to a CSV in this thing, so you can, if you're copying this, you can leave those lines out. They don't actually do anything. This line finds all the rows with all the info in them. So basically the rows of the leaderboard. And this row declares a master output that I will put all the info inside, and then I will write that to the CSV. This for loop here goes through all the rows and it creates an array of all the information, but it has 2 options. So the first option checks to see if the player has started his round, meaning there's no more tee time. If that's the case, it adds a 0 for the tee time. The second option is if the player hasn't started yet and he has a tee time. It adds placeholder zeros in the through and the round slots because they don't exist. And after it makes one of those two arrays and it appends it to the master output array or list. In Python, they're called lists. So it appends it to the master output list. Finally, in this line, it prints the array so I can see it. This makes the header for the CSV file, and this writes the info to the CSV, and this closes the web page. So remember how I placed all those comps by hand earlier? The numbered ones like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Yeah, it's a bit tedious, and if I make a change to comp 1, I have to do it all over again and replace them, which you actually saw me do a couple times probably in this video. There is another way, using ExtendScript, which is the language Adobe uses, and we can make our own scripts with it. So first, let me run the script so you can see what it actually does. But this is a different example. Same idea, but it looks a little different. Notice my comp is blank, except for one comp with the name 1, the number 1. And now my main comp is populated. So there's a bit of setup that would go into linking this script to After Effects. You can ask me in the comments below. I don't remember, there was a few steps. I don't remember exactly how I did it, but basically in Visual Studio Code, I downloaded, I think 2 Adobe extensions. One of them was the Adobe Script Runner, so I can run the script from Visual Studio. But that's besides the point. Okay, so here's my script for After Effects, my extend script. Line 1 grabs the comp in index 1, which is first in the list, which is the comp 1. Line 2 grabs my main comp that I want to add all these names into. It's using the index 2, which is second in the list. So I have to make sure when I run this script that the correct comp is in index number 2, but also in index number 1. I have to make sure it's the correct ones. These variables, Y position and Y position 2, are the Y values where the names and the comps will be placed. The times are the same. These are the times at which the names or comps will be placed. The for loop adds 24 names, broken into 2 parts for 2 full screens of names. Starting at line 13, it duplicates the comp. Line 14 adds it as a layer to my main comp. Line 15 adds it at a certain position. Line 16 adds it at a certain time. And line 17 to line 29 are all just adding opacity keyframes to the comp. It's not very elegant. I would imagine there's a better way of doing it, but I don't know. It gets the job done, but it seems like a lot just for adding some opacity keyframes. Line 30 increases Y position for the next comp, and line 31 increases the time for the next comp. And then the else part of the loop does the same thing, but later in time for the second page of the leaderboard. And on line 9 and 49, those are for the undo. Now if I undo once, it clears everything inside those brackets or inside those lines. If I didn't have those, it would only clear one small part of that whole for loop. And that's basically all the aspects of making this sort of automated, animated golf leaderboard. I've since updated the look and added some little animations to it, and this is what it looks like now, but the same principles apply. This is just kind of had more time spent on it, but nothing's really different. Same basic principles. My apologies if you were looking for like a full-on Python or ExtendScript tutorial. Other people are way better at that than me. I have nothing to add to that world, really. I can only follow. If you have any questions, though, please ask below. I'll help if I can. If you're interested in more After Effects ExtendScript tutorials, I highly recommend this guy's channel right here. It's fantastic. You will find everything you want to know somewhere in there. I guess the main issue now is finding a reason to automate After Effects. Like, I think this process is incredible. When you run the script like a little program, and then it fills into After Effects, and it fills up and renders. It's pretty powerful. So I guess the hard part is finding the ideas of what to automate. You kind of got to choose the right topic. So if anyone has any ideas, something, little tutorial they'd like me to try to make, please let me know in the comments. Thank you for sticking around to the end. Goodbye, and I love you.